That's Joe, and I work for him. In fact, I do so many jobs for Joe that the finest minds in the scientific world haven't completely analyzed all of my functions. I am Joe's liver. Perhaps because I have to do more jobs than any of my neighbors, I'm the largest organ in Joe's body. I weigh 3 pounds, and protected by ribs, I pretty well fill the upper right part of Joe's abdomen. I'm dark reddish-brown in color and about the size of a football. Before I talk more about my work, let me tell you about Joe. You could call him an average guy. He and I are in our mid-40s. He's married, has 2 children, and a good job. Joe's ambitious and works hard. That's okay with me, provided he takes care of himself. Joe's version of taking care of himself includes trying to maintain a healthy diet. He should do more in this department since he's a little overweight, and trying to limit his intake of alcohol. That's really important to me, as you will see. He quit smoking long ago. That's great. And he tries to exercise regularly. Some golf, swimming when he can, and walking. This is all fine, and Joe's intentions are good. But the combination of a demanding job and Joe's natural ambition can form a roadblock to good health, especially in the areas of proper diet and rest. I can tell you now that something is happening with Joe that is disturbing to me. And as big and efficient as I am, anything that disrupts my normal functions is very serious indeed. I'm afraid we'll have to face up to this soon. But let me tell you more about myself. My outer surface is smooth and pliable. It had better be, since so many of my neighbors snuggle up very close, using me as a kind of cushion. And oh yes, my small and most dependent neighbor, the gallbladder. He's quite attached to me and nestles against my lower backside. Much smaller than most people think, he relies on me completely for the substance that makes him important to Joe. I'll tell you more later about the gallbladder. My interior is a continuous mass of microscopic cells, tunneled by a maze of connected cylindrical spaces. Someone said I am like a huge building with a maze of crooked hallways and narrow, crooked rooms. A bit much, but not a bad analogy. All of Joe's organs are basically in the business of processing the blood pumped to them from the heart. I, however, am the virtuoso, involved in more functions than any other organ in the body. In fact, I do thousands of different jobs, and if I fall down on any of them, well, it could be goodbye, Joe. Fresh blood is pumped directly to me from Joe's aorta, the main artery from the heart. This is the fuel that keeps me functioning. But the reason my workload is so heavy is that I receive venous blood, that is, used blood containing waste and impurities from several sources along Joe's principal waste canal, the intestine. At my very center is my porta hepatis, doctor talk for door to the liver. All blood enters me here, and after my processing, which only takes from 6 to 10 seconds, the blood re-enters the heart for redistribution to Joe's body. I won't list all of my jobs, but I will tell you about some of the more important ones. It might help if I was pictured as a huge plant built for manufacturing, refining, and storage. A chemical company would have to build acres of plant to do even my simpler jobs. First, my storage functions. Sugar, for instance. When Joe eats a chocolate bar, the cane sugar is changed into blood sugar, glucose, in the intestine. Let too much of this glucose be fed into the bloodstream, and Joe would go into a coma and die. First, I turn the glucose into a starchy substance called glycogen. And in this way, I can store the equivalent of a ½ pound of sugar, doling it out in the right amounts as the body needs it. When Joe plays golf, his muscles are burning glucose, but also throwing off potentially deadly lactic acid. I also convert lactic acid into glycogen and store it. Red blood cells. Each second, 10 million of them die and must be disposed of. I salvage the breakdown products, storing them for use over and over again in building new red cells. I also process and store certain vitamins, minerals, iron, and other nutritional elements, regulating their transport through the body. And those are just a few of my storage jobs. Now look at some of my refining functions. The protein fragments, or amino acids, from the steak Joe loves so much could be as deadly as cyanide if they ever got into his bloodstream. I refine them into human protein. Any surplus I turn into urea and pass it along to the kidneys for excretion. Joe's adrenal glands would produce enough salt-saving hormones to make him terribly swollen if I didn't refine them and destroy the excess. My refining capabilities make me the great detoxifier. His poisons, such as nicotine, caffeine, and various drugs that Joe absorbs, were to be shot from my exit vessels directly into the heart, why, Joe would be dead within minutes. Shoot them into my entrance vessels, and the 6 to 10 seconds it takes for blood to pass through me gives me ample time to refine the poisons and extract their sting. I also regulate blood clotting, cholesterol and estrogen balance, and much more. Now, alcohol, one of my favorite subjects. But for me, alcohol would accumulate in Joe's blood in quantities that would be lethal. I refine it into harmless carbon dioxide and water if, I repeat, if Joe doesn't overdo it. As big and hardworking as I am, I can handle only about half a highball or 3/4 of a can of beer an hour. Think of that. Any more than this, and I have to work harder. Then, well, I'd like to return to this subject later. On to my manufacturing capabilities. Clotting factors. If Joe cuts his finger, he might well bleed to death but for the clotting factors that I make. I produce over 1,000 enzymes to handle my chemical conversions. I manufacture antibodies to protect Joe from disease. Also, new body proteins, vitamins, minerals, and much more. One of my most important products is bile. Joe thinks of bile as a bitter fluid that he could well do without. Wrong, Joe. The greenish-yellow bile that I manufacture is vital to Joe's digestive process. This fluid passes continuously from me to my neighbor, the gallbladder, which stores the bile and releases it in the proper amounts into the entrance to the small intestine, the duodenum. The bile helps to counteract stomach acids and aids in the digestion of fats. Because it contains red and green pigmentation, a result of waste products from the destruction of red blood cells I talked about before, if this bile should get into the bloodstream in too large amounts, it would cause a yellow staining of the skin and eyes. This is jaundice, not a disease, but a sure symptom that something is wrong with me. Let me dwell a minute on my close friend, the gallbladder. He's small by my standards, but he could cause Joe more intense pain than I could in my very worst condition. If the gallbladder should become infected, inflamed, or develop gallstones, as often happens, it could cause Joe excruciating abdominal pain, and in many cases, surgery would be needed for stone removal. In the worst cases, the entire gallbladder is removed and the bile passed directly from me into the duodenum. This is not a life-threatening situation, and thousands of people live normal lives without their gallbladders. Joe is normally a lively, outgoing person who generally feels good. But lately, he hasn't felt up to par, experiencing fatigue during the day, feeling listless. He thinks he may have a mild cold, and instead of doing something sensible about it, he might imbibe a bit more to bolster him, even skipping lunch or picking at his evening meal. Bad diet and alcohol, my worst enemies. Well, Joe doesn't know what's going on, but I do. What's more, I know what can happen if things are carried to their worst possible conclusion. Joe has the beginnings of liver disease. Ominous words even for people who know little about the human liver. One of the most dreaded end results of liver disease is cirrhosis. Each year, over 30,000 Americans die from cirrhosis, the seventh leading cause of death in the United States. With cirrhosis, my cells would be damaged and replaced by scar formation. As scar tissue accumulated, blood flow through me would be diminished, causing even more cells to die. Very bad news, possibly fatal for Joe. The road to cirrhosis can be approached from many directions, and one well-traveled route is alcohol. Fatty liver, the most common alcohol-related liver disorder, would cause me to enlarge and would cause Joe fullness and mass in his upper abdominal area, which could be tender and painful. Jaundice and abnormalities of liver function would follow, and Joe would be moving fast towards cirrhosis. Is this happening to Joe? How can he know if he doesn't see a doctor? Alcoholic hepatitis is an acute illness often characterized by nausea, vomiting, right upper and middle abdominal pain, fever, jaundice, and other symptoms.